Welcome to Vendetta Sports Media. It is Friday, and as usual, we are sitting here talking about UFC. Last week, we had a pretty hefty episode of information. This week, thought it was going to be a little bit slower, but in between last week's card, we've got some news. Tomorrow's card, we quickly kind of got another packed episode here. So we got a lot to talk about today, quite a few topics on the docket, but how are you guys doing today?
Pretty good. Love talking fights. Friday, always waiting for that to happen. Then we get just one more sleep and we got more UFC fights tomorrow. So hard to complain.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited. I feel like two pretty good fight night cards back to back. So that's always nice when you can get some good fight nights in between the huge pay-per-views.
Yeah. And we'll start it off right at last week's pay-per-view. And it ended up being a not only a great event, everyone kind of thought that was going to be a great event. You had a title fight on free TV, but it ended up being a pretty controversial one. So we obviously have to start right at the controversy, right at the scorecards. We had Alexa Grasso, Valentina Shevchenko. Ended up being a draw because one fighter scored it for Grasso, one fighter scored it for Valentina, and we had one draw because Mike Bell ruled the fifth round a 10-8 for Grasso. Otherwise, that scorecard was going towards Shevchenko. So, what are your guys' thoughts on the 10-8 in round five, and what are your reactions to getting that draw? Jerry, we'll throw it over to you first.
I found it hard to see it as a 10-8 round personally. I don't know necessarily that Shevchenko would have won the round, but I don't think she was dominated in a 10-8 fashion. To me, when I think of 10-8, it's one person pretty much controls and dominates for 4.5, 5 minutes of the round. And that really wasn't the case. It seemed like he was going back and forth a little bit early on. So I was kind of surprised when I heard that or saw that score of the last round. And I mean, I guess the only thing this means is depending on Valentina's health, because it sounds like she's injured, we would be getting this one for a third time. And it's turning into a fun little rivalry between two very talented fighters.
Yeah, I had Valentina winning that on my scorecard. I had like 3-2, but I definitely. I mean, I was kind of like, even though I thought Valentina was going to win, I was definitely kind of rooting for Grasso, but I thought it was a reach to give her the fifth like that in a 10-8. Kind of like Jerry was saying, but it definitely surprised me. And then you got the little salty Valentina after every time, like when she loses. But yeah, I don't know. I think that was one I was interested in. That's definitely because I think that division is so interesting, which is kind of unfortunate right now because I like everything else that's going on, but then it's kind of unfortunate that was a draw for this fight. But that is a fight that I wouldn't mind seeing a third one of, to be honest. So
Yeah. I have a lot of the same thoughts as you guys. I thought it was a 10-9 Grasso, and just about everyone else did. And um, I want to get your guys' thoughts on something because this is something that I thought about after the fact. I scored at 3-2 Grasso, but I feel like this was a pretty split fight, right? You had two clear rounds Grasso, two clear rounds Shevchenko, and then round four was kind of your swing round in there. And I thought about it after the fact, probably the next day, and I was like, a draw really isn't the worst outcome because it's like based on how close that fight was, like that was a 50-50 fight. It's like obviously that shouldn't have been ruled a draw just mathematically based on how a draw occurs. You don't score 10-8 round five. But I thought about it and I was like, I mean, who won that fight? Like I mean, that was about as close of a fight as you can get. So ultimately, I don't hate that it was scored a draw. And I kind of thought about it and I was like, well, maybe like a better path to a draw would have actually been a 10-10 in round four. 10-10s are practically like frowned upon. And they don't want people doing that because it does create more draws, especially in 3 round fights. But I thought maybe this was actually a scenario where you could justify a 10-10. And I pulled some stats on the 10-10 round, and there have been only 7 10-10 rounds since UFC 200, and all 7 have happened outside of the United States. So it's pretty clear that in the U.S., the U.S. jurisdictions are saying, hey, don't do that. No 10-10s. But I thought this was a situation where you could potentially do that because round four was basically, fan opinion was basically split 50-50 on who won that round. Would you guys have been less mad at a draw if round four was a 10-10 rather than round five being a 10-8?
Well, honestly, probably not. I'm really not mad about it being a draw. Like, I'm more just surprised that it was given a 10-8. So, I mean, had it been a 10-10 in round four, it would have made it seem a little better, I guess. But end of the day, same result.
Yeah, same thing. I think it would have made it better, sure. Just because the 10-8 is a whole nother level of things for people to complain about. Because not only now are they going to complain about the draw itself, but that what's like the criteria for a 10-8 round and stuff like that as well. So I think a 10-10 would have made it easier because kind of like you were saying, I was fine with it going either way. Like it was
Mhm.
very close to me. Even though I think I might have saw it Valentina, but I was also super on the fence, thought it could have went the other way. So I think yeah, it would have made it more simpler if it was a 10-10. Except well, it would have confused a whole lot of fight fans, but it would have been better than the 10-8.
Yeah. And then before we get into how this division should move forward, because like you said, Anthony, like this division is like probably in terms of having actual title contenders, I think this division is in the best spot it's ever been in. But I do want to talk about like the actual fight itself. What were your guys' reactions to the fight itself? This one ended up being great fight, highly competitive. Valentina made some adjustments. Grasso made some adjustments. What were your reactions to the fight in itself, aside from obviously the big mistake in the 10-8 in round five? Anthony, we'll throw it over to you first this time.
I remember the first thing that popped off to me was that I mean, even though Valentina's getting older and she has a lot of miles on it, she's still just extremely quick. Um, and there's a clear difference, I think, with the speed and stuff that she throws at. But besides that, I thought uh I thought Grasso did great everywhere, on the ground and in the clinches and transitions and stuff. Always, kind of getting back to her feet for the most part when she was getting taken down, and not staying there too much. Like she might have got held down a little too long at times, but I felt like she was always quick to try to pop up to try to save and win the round, and keep it competitive in that way. And then she just did a little 1-2. She was working her jab and stuff, so I thought that was good as well. But overall, I think. I mean, and then I guess the one judge felt like that. I was gonna say she was in positions to finish at times, and she threw up a lot of submissions, but just wasn't able to get it locked in this time. But at least she was always keeping Valentina on her toes in that way as well.
Yeah, I would say it was a very even match, like we were saying earlier. I was only able to watch the first three rounds, and then my phone died, so I was out. Couldn't watch the rest of it. That was a bummer. Saw all the rest of the result after the fact, but just watching, I was like, there's a lot of differences I saw from this one than the first fight. It seemed like they were going a little harder, throwing more strikes. Obviously, it went around extra, but it felt like Valentina had better chances this time on the ground than she did in the first fight. Even if it wasn't anything super, she did have one submission attempt compared to none in the last fight. And Grosso kind of, saw the knockdown, so that was a big thing in her favor and showed her kind of having that a little superior stand up game. But I'll let you guys talk more on this one.
Yeah. I was surprised at how good Valentina was at winning the minutes. Like Valentina really controlled the fight with winning like large portions with her jab, which really surprised me. And then I was also surprised at how close Grasso got to finishing on those couple of occasions. Round two, she made her do the backwards somersault because she hit her so hard, and it's like that's a massive moment that put that round in her favor. Round five, she was able to get on top and threaten submission from top, throw a lot of ground and pound. So I was surprised at how much success she had with the big moments, even the knees in round four. Even though that round was 50-50, it was only 50-50 because she was able to find that series of 6, 7 knees landing. in that round there. So it's like I was surprised at how much success Grasso was able to have with like big moments. Um, but I was also kind of surprised at the mistakes that Valentina made. Like Valentina is someone that you don't really think of as making mistakes, but it's like I won't count the getting dropped in round two as a mistake because I think that is more credit to Grasso. But it's like in round four, she thought she was a ground opponent. She wasn't. She gets hit with a bunch of knees. It's like technically she's not grounded because she's just reaching and putting her fingers on the mat. You got to have the palm of your hand down to be grounded. So that's a mistake. Round five, the whole reason Grasso got on top wasn't because Grasso landed a takedown. It's because Valentina went for a throw and it looked pretty sloppy. Grasso was able to slip out, get on top. Valentina won the first 3.5 minutes of that round. And if she doesn't try that throw, Grasso never gets on top. Grasso never gets in the position to be given a 10 round. So I was also kind of surprised with, I thought that was a very bad decision to try that throw in round five. And that is something that I don't think is getting talked about a lot. I was surprised with the mistakes that Valentina was making, but at the same time, I thought she had a lot more success than she did in the first fight, just in controlling the fight. So I think it's kind of 50-50 in that regard. So positive and negatives on both sides for Valentina, in my opinion. And then moving on to the rest of this division, do you guys want to see the third fight? This division is in a great spot, and you have two worthy challengers, whether it be Blanchfield, whether it may be Manon Fior. We have two women that can easily be put into a title spot. Do you guys want to see the trilogy fight? Jerry, we'll go with you this time.
I mean, I've been against. I've been talking against all the rematches we've been getting, but this is one of the cases where it would make sense. Grosso gets the first win, then we have a draw, and it was very close. Even looking at the judging, like we've said earlier, had the judge not scored it a 5-8 round, Shevchenko would have won the rematch. So it'd be 1-1. I don't mind the rematch in this, but for next, it's still going to just depend on, like I said, how long Valentina Shevchenko is going to be out. Getting surgery on her thumb, so who knows how long that can keep her out for. Meanwhile, Furrow, Blanchfield, they look like they're ready to go again already. I wouldn't mind maybe giving one of them the title shot. It's not because Shevchenko doesn't deserve it, but because she's not ready and these other two are ready to go. Just keep the division moving to an extent.
I think, yeah, I don't know. It is tough. I would say it depends on if you want to make Burrow and Blanchfield fight each other or not. Because in a division that I'd say struggle having top talent and a lot of challengers that are exciting for fans, there might not be a reason to waste one of them in a like elimination match. So if you're not like, because if you're gonna do the trilogy, I would say that would, yeah, like you were saying, would take time. So you might have to make those because they can't, unless you got to make them fight each other so the whole division's just not log jammed. But at the same time, if you don't want to waste two of them or one of them, I think you just give one the title fight and then one the next one, and then at that same time you still can sell a Valentina fight based off of like name value.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you guys said, but it's like anytime there's a draw, I feel like the right thing to do is book it again. So it's hard to say that you shouldn't do it again, but also this division has been in the best spot it's ever been, and now it's in such a good spot that you can turn it bad almost because, you know, if you do, unless the champion is going to fight 3 times next year, like which I hope that happens, but we're in a position where it's like, could you imagine if they do Grasso Valentina and then they do Manon or Blanchfield for the title? Whoever doesn't get that title shot, and they're practically equally deserving, whoever doesn't get it is going to be looking at their next fight being the first quarter of 2025, probably. It's like, unless someone really gets on their horse and fights 3 times next year, it's like that is really tough to ask for the person who doesn't get the title shot. Um, at the same time, if you do the rematch, book them against one another. Now, one of them loses, one of them gets the fight. What happens then? Because now we're put in a spot where we could quickly be out of contenders again. So it's like, I don't think we're going to actually come to a good answer. I think all of the options that you have in this division have pretty big, like, negatives to them where someone's going to get screwed or the timetable is going to be awful. So that I don't really think they can go right here, but I imagine, assuming Valentina is healthy and can turn around rather quickly, I imagine they book that trilogy. But hey, what happens if Valentina wins? Because now you're looking at 1-1-1.
Yeah.
And are you looking at a fourth fight? And now the division's in even a crazier spot. So I imagine this is going to be a point of discussion for a while. But yeah, I think they do the trilogy next just because that seems to be the the direction the UFC is going in. And I am not a proponent of doing a bunch of rematches and trilogies, but I just think that's the spot we're in.
Yeah, you brought up a good point there. Like I was even thinking about it. Could be similar to the Figueiredo and Moreno battles we had, and took over more or less like 3 years of the division because they drew the first one, loss, win, one way or another, win, loss. So they were 1-1-1, and then they had to have that fourth fight to really decide it. That's something that slowed down the division so much because it was a 3 year span. First fight was what, December 2020. The last one was January this year. Quite a while, but I don't know if the UFC necessarily wants to do something like that again, especially considering they have these top talent fighters who are ready for title shots already.
Hmm.
Yeah, I was gonna say real quick, at least in that case too, it benefited the UFC that flyweight didn't really have any contenders that much, so they got lucky in that way of when they're doing all those title fights, they were able to find some or build up a couple people. But yeah, that's a problem that they don't have to fix right now in that division because they, like you said, they have so many challengers right now waiting.
Yeah, I was gonna say that as well because in the span of time they were doing that, you saw Pantoja emerge and you saw Kai Car France emerge, so it kind of worked out well. They were also able to squeeze in an interim there, and it's like I don't think that is like what the I don't think that's the position that the UFC goes in here unless Valentina's out 6 months and they decide, hey, we're gonna toss a interim belt on Aaron and Manon Fior, which also now you're getting in a whole nother discussion of when should you whip out interim belts. Is an injury that takes 6 months worth an interim belt? Probably not, but it may make those girls feel better for fighting for a number one contender spot. You just put some gold on it. It's like there's negatives to just about every idea that you can throw at this. So
Yeah. It's gonna be interesting to see what they do.
yep, I
Interesting
agree.
situation.
And then moving down the card, we had Jack Della Maddalena and Kevin Holland in the co-main slot. This fight was billed as a fight that was going to be fight of the night. I thought it was going to be a great fight. Do you guys think it lived up to the initial expectations that people were expecting? Anthony, we'll throw it over to you.
I'll keep it short. I don't think, not really. I would say I was expecting a little bit more. I mean, it was definitely competitive, and there were some hands being thrown for sure, but um, I didn't think. I don't know, because it's tough without saying like one of them just getting worked or knocked out makes it, that doesn't mean the fight was as good. But I would have liked for a little more action, a little more harder hits. I don't feel like from what I can recall, I don't think the whole fight anyone was in real danger. I know Kevin got touched up a couple times, like decent combos, but yeah, no one was in real danger. But in saying that too, I do think they each did fine. Like I thought, it was a good fight all around. Just not, I will say, not great fight like anticipated.
Yeah, I would agree with you. It was like still fun to watch, but I was expecting a little bit more. Looking at the stats, like it was 105 for JDM to 127 for Calvin Holland in total strikes. I was expecting a little bit more. I know it's only a 3 round fight, but I thought these guys were really going to be going to war and like throwing hands, leaving the cage bloodied and battered to an extent because that's what we've seen these guys do. They are two tough dudes that really like going at it with people. Wasn't quite the case. Still a fun fight, but not what I was hoping for.
Yeah, I agree with you guys, and I don't necessarily say that as a bad thing that it didn't live up to expectations. I just think we got two guys in there that were cautious of each other's power.
Mhm.
I think that's probably the most defensive that I've seen Kevin Holland on the feet. He was looking to be very defensively diligent. Same with JDM. Ultimately, JDM wins because, like Anthony mentioned, he put together a few good combos, right? When JDM lands, he does land hard. So when he's putting together in I think it was he won 2 rounds, and in those 2 rounds, he landed 2 or 3 combinations, lands body and head each time, and that's about enough to get it done. Because even when they were landing, a lot of shots weren't landing clean because both guys are so defensively responsible. So ultimately, JDM lands a few clean shots, gets his hand raised. Um, so, what do you guys want to see next for these fighters? Because these are both pretty big names in this division. Whether it's fan favorite, whether it's prospect, these guys are both well known commodities and add some good life to the welterweight division. So, where do you want to see these two go next, Jerry? We'll go to you first.
I know it's not likely going to happen because Ian Gary has higher hopes, but a Jack Della Maddalena and an Ian Gary fight would be pretty entertaining, in my opinion. I think those two guys would probably end up going at it. We expected that with this one. I think it would still be same expectations, except neither of them would back down. A lot of trash talking would take place. But realistically, I wouldn't be surprised if we see like Jack Della Maddalena take on Vicente Luque, maybe a Sean Brady. As far as Kevin Holland goes, he still has that star power, so he still can fight in the top 15 for sure. He didn't drop down in the rankings. Maybe a guy like Neil Magny. He's coming off a loss. Both of them are. Why not book that one?
Um, I'd agree in the sense, well, that yeah, Ian Gary one would definitely be a lot of fun, but just keep throwing them ranked guys
Yeah.
and seeing, because I mean they're both entertaining fighters, so in general, so any fight you book them should at least be, hopefully at the bottom line entertaining, depending if maybe if you try to book them against a Jeff Neal and they just get outclassed, but and I think they're both good and skilled as well, so why not try to see how far they can go and if they can get that title. It's kind of simple. I don't have a specific name, but just keep moving them up.
Hmm. Yeah, I won't go too long here because I have a lot of the same names that you guys have said. JDM, the two off the top of my head were Luque and Jeff Neal. Um, Jeff Neal was willing to take on the prospect battle with Ian Gary. Sounds like that fight is not really being talked about anymore. So do Jack Della Maddalena instead. Two good boxers there. And I like the Neil Magny fight for Kevin Holland. Both coming off losses. Holland called them out, so I think that makes sense, and I think that's a fight Kevin can probably win, and then he wins that, and then you book him against someone else in that 8 to 12 range. That can give you an entertaining fight. We'll see how the division looks at that point. Knowing Kevin Holland, that'd be in 3 months, so it'll probably look exactly the same. So yeah, I think that'd be a good course of action for Holland. Get him back on the win path and get him back moving towards the top of that division.
I do just have one more question surrounding more Jack Della Maddalena. He came into the UFC, three straight TKO wins, submission, and now he's had two straight split decision wins, which really split decision. Anytime it happens, it could go either way. Are you worried about that at all? Do you think it's something that he needs to be worried about? That these fights are getting closer and closer as he starts to move up the rankings.
I'll say that I'm concerned about things with Jack Della, more so the grappling skill set. I'm not really concerned about the split decisions. I'm concerned that he could get out grappled by some of these really good welterweight grapplers. Um, but the split decisions don't concern me because I think both of those should have been unanimous decisions. I thought he won the Holland fight pretty clearly. I understand how you score it for um, Holland because I tweeted something during the event about how it's kind of hard to tell what's landing, what's not, especially on TV with camera angles. But I thought Jack Della won that fight. The Basil Hafez fight, I thought he beat beat Basil up pretty bad in rounds 2 and 3. So I wouldn't necessarily consider it a concern because I think Basil Hafez is actually not going to be bad in the UFC. I think Kevin Holland's a pretty good name. I think if you put him in there with Neil Magny, I think he'd make that look pretty similar to what Ian Gary did. So I'm not concerned personally.
That was the late replacement first debut fight, right?
Mhm.
Okay, because I mean, JDM has a lot of hype behind him, but funny, yeah, that you mentioned that his last two have been split decisions because you, I mean, I just want to see them both like get matched up and try to, get on their run to the title. But I was thinking of a name and I saw Gilbert Burns at 5, but I was just thinking that might be a huge problem for JDM based off the grappling we saw in that other fight. So,
Mhm. I think that's a good fight if JDM gets one more. Like if he were to beat Jeff Neal, I think that's a reasonable step up after that. I think that's two fights down the line, and that'll test his grappling right there. So that would make sense down the road. Or maybe they do Sean Brady now, and that's the one that tests his grappling.
he
So
tests his wrestling.
yeah, either way, I think it'll work out for him.
No, I agree with you guys. I think that it's more of a note of his grappling is something to be worried about than the decisions. Because I didn't remember the Hafez fight all that much, but I
Yeah,
thought I thought he beat Kevin Holland pretty easily.
yeah, and the
Yeah.
Basil fight, he also had the weight cutting stuff go on
Hmm.
where he was supposed to fight. They originally booked him against Sean. Sean pulls out. They bring in that Josiah Harrell guy. They find out he has a brain disease. He
Oh,
gets pulled out, and then they book him the next weekend. So he ends up cutting weight 2 weekends in a row. So that's a part of that as well. And then you can probably hear my dog going absolutely crazy, so I'll make this quick. Raul Rojas in the co-main, or excuse me, down the card. What did you make of his performance and his win? Jerry will throw it over to you.
I mean, what 54-second knockout? This is kind of what I expected. I expected them to throw him some sort of tin can that he could just go out, beat quickly, get the Mexican crowd in Vegas up and at it. Was celebrating obviously Mexican Independence Night. I'm not surprised. He just went in there and dominated for as long as the fight was. Don't have much more to say on that.
Yeah, for this one, I'd left my house and was heading to a friend's house, and I missed the fight. I didn't get to see it. So, but it was good. I'm glad because I liked him too. I know disappointing other fight he had before this one, but I like Rosas. I think he's fun. He's fun to root for. Um, so interesting to see that he got it done with the hands. I saw the knockout on like Instagram, and it looked like a good shot, but I think more than anything, like you said, it was a matchup that it was meant to, promote him and benefit him, but way to handle business, make it quick, and then it was fun to see him do it in a different way besides grappling and submission.
Yeah, I'll just add that that was a matchup that he was, probably supposed to win. But I do think it's important to go out there and win those fights in that fashion, right? That's a fight where you're supposed to go out there and look good, so you have to do it, right? There's been times in the past where you're supposed to go out there and look good, and guys don't do it. So I do kind of appreciate him going out there and getting the job done in that fashion, and I like to see him show some comfortability with his hands, right? Even if you're not fighting the best striker in the world, I like to see him kind of show the willingness to use his hands and not have to wrestle. So I do think that's a benefit to his overall development, where it's not something that he absolutely has to go wrestle. That's just a step in the right direction for him, especially at his age.
I was gonna say too, real quick, what one last thing on especially he did what he needed to do on a bounce back fight too. I would say after some people may say the hype train was already derailed, but like I think that's huge when you do have a lot of hype and you maybe you take a loss but get right back on track and almost make it like people forget about it.
hmm Yeah, and also, like in the middle of a main card of a themed card for Mexican Independence Day, and like he has to represent in that spot. He's got to walk out to a packed arena. He's 18 years old, coming off a loss. Like there were some things in that fight that he had to overcome that didn't exactly have to do with the fight itself, the opponent itself. Like in terms of pressure, he dealt with the pressure well, and I think that in itself is a positive too. So I think that's always something you can look at as a positive because he's going to be putting more pressure spots going forward. It's nice to know he doesn't crack under that pressure. And then moving on from UFC Noche, we had some big news come out wasn't last night, the night before at about 10:30 Eastern time. They dropped three massive title fights, and I was getting ready to go to bed, and I said, "Well, looks like I'm going to write a couple articles right now instead." So, thanks Dana White for always dropping news very late on the East Coast, but that's all right. We've got three title fights, so let's just give our thoughts and reactions to these bookings. Some surprise, maybe some not a surprise. We'll start with the UFC 295 co-main event. That is Yuri Prohashka versus Alex Pereira for the light heavyweight belt, which is currently vacant. What are your guys' thoughts on this fight and that card as a whole now? Because now you do have the main event of Jones versus Stipe, co-main of Yuri versus Pereira. Jerry, we'll throw it over to you.
I love this fight. I think it's probably the best fight they could make in the light heavyweight division. Two stand up guys that are just going to go out there and try and bang and knock each other's heads off. I'm very excited for this one. And I mean, makes the card that much better. It was already a great card getting to see John Jones take on Stipe finally. Kenzie Dern, Jessica Andrade is on there right now. Matt Schnell has had his moments. So it's an exciting card. Still won't say it's worth $800 for a ticket, but hey, that stuff's crazy. And I mean, I don't know if you guys saw the most expensive ticket for any UFC fight this year, up excluding that so far, was like 54,000. The most expensive ticket for this UFC 295 is like 112, 120,000 for one ticket.
Damn,
Jeez.
it
New
must be
York
nice stuff.
must be nice to just be able to. Oh yeah, let's just go drop that right quick.
um, yeah, I think kind of like you said, this is the best fight for me that they could have made. These are my two favorite fighters in this weight class. I think it's Prohashka versus Pereira. I think should be a lot of fun. I don't know. I saw one of my friends said that kind of sucks for Ankalaev or whatever, but I don't care. I like the other two more. So I was happy. I was happy with this announcement. I did have a quick question. Did Hill get what was his injury? Why'd they take the belt from him?
Torn Achilles.
Right. So it was a long, long time. Okay. Yeah. So I think this is perfect. Because I feel like seeing these two in the title fight is a perfect way to get everyone excited about this weight division again, even with the injuries. And then I can't remember the last time they had the championship fight, how long ago it was, but this will be a good one. I was super excited about this announcement.
Yeah, I think this is a great announcement to get the light heavyweight division back into a good spot because it was originally supposed to be the Yuri and Glover rematch last December. That follows through. Then they book Ankalaev and Blachowicz. That goes to a draw. And then the following month, you've got Hill and Glover, and Jamal Hill runs through Glover, and they're working on the Hill and Prohashka fight when he tore his Achilles. So Hill's my guy in this weight class, in part because he reps Michigan, so a little biased there, but I also really like his skills as well. So it sucks to see him out, but this is one of the most exciting fights you can make in this division. I have absolutely no complaints at all with this fight booking. I think it's a great fight, and I think it's a great spotlight for the main event. Or excuse me, it's a great spotlight to put it underneath the main event of Jones versus Stipe, excuse me. And it's like a lot of people that are going to be ordering Jones versus Stipe are probably casual fans. There's going to be a large casual audience, and I don't say that as a demeaning thing. I think it's good for the sport when more people watch. But those types of people know who Alex Pereira is because he had the two fights with Israel Adesanya. So I do think that helps as well for the more casual audience that may not be highly familiar. And if they don't know who Yuri Prohashka is, they will after they watch that fight. So I expect that to be a really good fight, and it should be entertaining. And as far as Ankalaev goes, people have been talking about Ankalaev being the next best thing since sliced bread for years now. He's been the MMA nerds uncrowned champion, but he went out there and fought to a draw in a title fight. And it's like I scored that fight a draw as well. Like it's not like that was a bad decision. Draw was a very, very reasonable scorecard to have in that fight. So he got his title opportunity and did not beat Jan Blachowicz in his title opportunity. And when you look at Alex Pereira, they put him, yes, it was a 3-rounder, but Alex Pereira beat Jan Blachowicz to earn his title opportunity. So, yeah, and even like the original Ankalaev and Jan fight, Jan won the early round. So it's like Ankalaev needed the 4th and 5th round, which isn't a bad thing, but Alex got it done in a 3-round fight. So it's a little bit different there. So yeah, I don't feel bad for Ankalaev. He's got Johnny Walker on
That's why I thought he
284.
was matched up.
Yeah, he's got Johnny Walker on the next pay-per-view, and maybe he puts himself right back in title contention if he beats Johnny Walker. So it'll work out for Ankalaev. Then moving on to 296, we got the main event and the co-main event. Main event, Colby Covington, Leon Edwards. We have been waiting for this since March. This has been the fight that we thought was going to happen. Now it's finally booked. And then in the co-main, we have a rematch between Alexandre Pantoja and Brandon Royval. So we kind of see the shapings of this card coming to fruition. What are your guys' thoughts on this card and these two matchups? Anthony, we'll go to you first.
I mean, I definitely think the Leon and Colby it's like so easy to make. Like that's what we've been wanting and waiting for. I'm just glad I'm more glad that it's just finally happening because it's something that should be done if you're a UFC matchmaker or anyone that has a little bit of common sense and likes fighting because it's a pretty easy fight to make. So that should be fun too with the the press conference and everything too. And then on the other one, I don't know. I can't remember the exact last amount of fights, but because Royval is probably my second favorite fighter in that division behind Moreno. So I was just surprised when I saw he was getting a title shot. I couldn't remember exactly what he had done that made him like the next guy up, but I'm just happy to see it. So I'm super excited for that fight as well because like I said, I was a big Royval fan too, but when he was on his first surge towards the belt. Unfortunately, he ran into Moreno, and Moreno beat him. I think Royval's shoulder came out in that fight, though, or popped out. But so I'm excited that I get to with Moreno on the side now, not champ. I can root for Royval to actually win the belt now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I'll start with that Royval fight. I'm excited for that rematch, and I just like the fact that it's some new faces in the flyweight division at the top. Sure, we saw Pantoja win the belt by beating Brandon Moreno, but that was the first title fight of the last four prior that wasn't Figueiredo and Moreno, apart from that one interim belt. But I like this. I'm excited for this one. I think it's going to be fun. The rematch, Royval lost by a rear naked choke in the first fight. I think he'll be able to get a little bit back in this one, so don't know which way that's going yet. Pantoja is a killer, though. The main event, Leon Edwards is probably my favorite fighter in the UFC. I was at the first or second Usman fight where he head kicked him, and since then I'm like, Colby Covington's the next fight to make. We're finally getting it. Like you said, Anthony, the press conference is going to be fun. And James and I were talking a little bit before. Can't do the Usman rematch. Obviously, Gilbert, Bilal, I don't think either of them truly deserve a title shot at the moment. So this is the one to make. Doesn't matter. My issue originally was, oh, Colby hasn't fought in it forever. He hasn't really beat anyone who's still fighting. Screw it. Colby's a solid fighter. Usman fights were closer than they were made out to be, I would say. And it's going to just be a fun fight. Who knows? We could have an era of Sean Strickland, Sean O'Malley, and Colby Covington as champions at the same time. Who would have thought that?
Yeah, I'll start with the Leon and Colby matchup, and I get why people dislike giving Colby a title shot because he doesn't have the best resume anymore because of the wins that he has. A lot of those guys are now older. Your RDAs, your Lawlers, but in my opinion, I think you can see a lot of you can learn a lot from wins or losses, right? And when you watch Usman versus Covington, you can learn things about Colby Covington's skill set and get an evaluation of how good he is as a fighter. And I don't think you have to beat Usman to show that you're a good fighter when you fight him. Now that Usman's out of the title picture for this second for this moment, it's like I think Colby Covington has proven that he's the second best fighter in that weight class over the last 2 or 3 years. It'd be like if Volkanovski was no longer the champ and you give it to Holloway, even if he sat out for a year and a half. It'd be like before Whitaker lost, if Whitaker got a title fight in a time where Adesanya wasn't the champion despite being inactive. I think those guys who sit at the division at the top of the division for that long and are that competitive with long reigning champions deserve some respect in matchmaking. I think Bilal deserves a title shot as well, but I think they can give it to him next. Whoever wins or loses, I don't think there's a need for a rematch. So I think you can give Bilal the next shot and move this division forward. And I think this will ultimately be good for the division that they're matched up. And I think we can start getting the ball rolling here. And then as far as the Royval and Pantoja matchup goes, I think I've made it pretty clear over the last 2 episodes. I'm getting tired of rematches and trilogies. But I think the alternative options here were worse. And, were you going to give Moreno another shot? I respect Moreno a lot, but I don't think he can get the immediate rematch. I don't think Amir Albazi deserved a shot. So based off Kaikar France, great win. You didn't really win that fight, if we're being honest. The eyes tell you that. So, I'm fine with this being the fight because Royval coming off that flying knee knockout of Mateus Nicolau, and he's a great fighter. Their first fight was very, very fun. I rewatched that before the Moreno Pantoja fight. That was a great fight. They threw down for the entirety of the fight before it finished. I remember watching that fight and going, how the hell does Pantoja win this? Because he was to the point where he was tired, throwing wild hooks. And right as I go, how the hell does he win this? He jumps on the back, gets the rear naked choke. So I think that fight could play out very differently in the future as well. So I think that's a great fight, and that'll end up being a great card, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's going to be a fun card. And I just want one more thing on like the Colby side. I think. Do you see? He said if he wins the title, his first defense is going to be against Islam.
Yeah, I did see that, and
I don't know how I'd feel about that, but
I don't know how I feel about it either. But there's a storyline there because he called out Habib for forever. And the second Habib retired, he's been calling out Islam forever. So it'd be tough for Islam to walk away from a division that has Gaethje as a challenger and that has Volkanovski as a challenger. But I could see that fight happening.
Yeah, I was gonna say one thing though, real quick too. This was about earlier about the Alex Pereira. Has anyone speed ran the possibility of becoming a champion in 2 different divisions as fast as him?
It really is amazing.
That's got to be a record.
It's got to be. From the time he entered the UFC to if he gets double champ, and it's like he fights so frequently too. He won the belt last year, so it's like less than 2 years in the division. And I googled it for the post. He'll be the 9th guy in UFC history to have a belt in 2 weight classes. He will be not simultaneous. There's been 4 simultaneous, but he would be one of 9 fighters to do that. And coming from no grappling experience is wild.
And it's only taken him 7 fights to do so. If he does, that's
yeah,
it's crazy. I mean, and 2 of those fights have been title fights.
Yeah.
It's absurd.
Mm-hmm. That is crazy. Moving on, the last bit of news that we had was Paul Felder. His return seems actually likely. It kind of has started as like, Paul Felder won't actually return. And then he goes, oh, yeah, I kind of want to fight again. To him joining the USADA testing pool and going, I'm not committing to anything. I'm going to see how my body feels. And then a report came out that he has been added to the UFC roster once again and that they are working or his return is targeted for UFC 300 was the specific phrasing the report used. So it actually looks like they're looking to book Paul Felder for UFC 300. First, what are your guys' thoughts on Paul Felder returning and it being an actual real possibility? And who would you like to see him fight? Jerry, throw it over to you first.
I mean, it'd be cool to see him come back. I've seen him as a commentator a lot more than I saw him as an active fighter. Definitely did see some of his fights before he retired, and I think there's a time for people to kind of hang it up. I like the idea of him coming back for 300, but he's a good commentator. I like him behind the mic and maybe just one more fight, I guess. But as far as like people to go, I have two names. Jim Miller, just another OG of the fight game in the lightweight division, assuming that that's where Felder goes back into. And then maybe like Tony Ferguson, retirement fight for all three of those guys potentially. Three-way triple threat match, all three of them fighting each other.
I think. Well, my first thing is, I didn't know. Is it just one more fight, just for one more fight? He misses it a little bit, or is he trying to do? My friend asked me, and I didn't know. Is it just one last fight, or is it to do a run at all for like the title?
I'm not sure at all, to be honest. I honestly don't know. That part, I don't think anybody knows.
Okay, because like Jerry was saying, I actually really like him as a commentator. I like him at the desk and stuff. So, but he was a very fun fighter. I don't know his age up top, but I mean, if he's still got it and his body feels good, he was a fun fighter. I think he had that weird stat where all the fighters that beat him would like lose their next fight or whatever. So, yeah, I'm excited. I don't have any names. Definitely those retirement fights. You might actually convince Tony to do a 1v1v1 in an octagon. So that'd be good. Or you could tell him it'd be a 1v2 and he might do it. But
UFC and WWE partnered now. Wouldn't be crazy.
yeah, true. So no, I'm excited. I'll for anything that happens with that.
Yeah. I think Paul Felder deserves the respect of being given another fight because it's not like he was ran out of the sport because he was uncompetitive. His last two fights were RDA and Dan Hooker when Dan Hooker was still climbing as a fighter. So, and his Dan Hooker fight was a 5-round war that was fight of the night, and I think in fight of the year contention. Like that fight was a serious scrap. That was in New Zealand. So he went to enemy territory and fought Dan Hooker on his own land and went to absolute war, gave the fans a great fight. And then on top of that, he took the RDA fight on like a Monday or Tuesday of fight week. He was like, yeah, I'm 20 pounds over. He makes the weight. And then he goes out there, fights. RDA holds him up against the fence for 5 rounds. And Paul Felder gets on the mic and he's like, yeah, we got a bunch of people who don't actually do their jobs. You make weight, you come and fight. When you call me to fight, I make the weight. That's what I do because I'm a fighter. And it's like, all right, this guy's awesome. So when he has done things like that for the company, I think he deserves a fight at UFC 300 in a return fight, especially if he's willing to go through the USADA testing pool for 6 months prior to do it. So matchups. I think Tony Ferguson is the fight to make, just simply based on like where's Tony at in his career. Paul's coming out of retirement, and I think that's makes a lot of sense for both guys. They were both in their prime at similar times, never fought. Jim Miller makes sense as well. Some other names I thought of: Bobby Green potentially, Michael Johnson potentially. Those are two other guys in the lightweight division that kind of jumped around in my brain. And I don't really like the idea of throwing him in there with the ranked guy, but if he's actually serious about trying to go for the title, which he shouldn't be, I think a Jalen Turner matchup would be the ranked fight, which I don't think he should get a ranked fight. I don't think that'd be smart, but I think if he's actually serious about being a ranked fighter again, I think that'd be the fight, which I want to preface that by saying that is not a very good idea for Paul, but I think that'd be the direction to go.
I
can't imagine.
Oh, go ahead, Anthony.
I was just real quick. I can't imagine coming out of retirement and then Jalen Turner's in front of you in the octagon.
Yeah, that'd be insane.
Scary.
That would be rough. Only other guy I want to just throw out there, and I mentioned it to James before, I just think it'd be a funny fight. Could be entertaining. Say Conor comes out, gets smoked by Michael Chandler. They want, the UFC is going to want Conor on UFC 300 if he's able to fight. Why not a Irish Dragon versus an Irishman? James was saying that they have history, they have beef in the past. Why not do something like that if McGregor comes out and looks bad and gets smoked by Michael Chandler?
If McGregor loses to Chandler, that fight actually makes a lot of sense for the
See,
UFC.
because I was just gonna say that's a fight where if McGregor loses, I would still be on board for a sure, just forgot his name. I was looking up something else. Paul Felder fight because yeah, that's when I could still be entertaining. Like I wouldn't just be like, oh well, McGregor's gonna get knocked out again. I'd still be like, that'd be fun for me. And the striking styles, I was gonna worry about the counter. I feel like the way Paul Felder boxes.
Mhm.
We got some breaking news that just came across. Another fight for UFC 296, Wonderboy and Shakfak Rakhmonov.
No
Oh my
way.
god.
Shamakter Sandu, he's tweeting that fight. Wonderboy tweeted that the UFC offered it and he's accepted it. That's going to be a fun fight.
Why do you accept that fight?
I don't know.
I don't
Oh
6-7.
God.
This will be a the real test right here because I think Shavkat's him and I don't know, he just looks so much better than everybody in this division right now, but at least Thompson is a bit of a test as in that weird striking. You gotta you gotta be able to hit him and keep up with him and stuff like that, so I'm interested to see in that way. But then also the wrestling scares me a little bit. But
Yeah, Wonderboy tweeted, UFC offered and I've accepted. At Shavkat Rakhmonov, let's close out the year strong. December 16th, can't wait. Wonderboy has said in the past that he would not fight Shavkat. He literally said, like, that's not a fight that he was like, that guy's crazy. I won't fight him. Now he's fighting him. If they strike for 15 minutes, I like Wonderboy's chances, but my God. And that's not a dismissive of Shavkat's striking skills.
No.
Because he can strike very, very well. Wonderboy, elite striker, but my God, if Shavkat gets a hold of him, gets him in the clinch, gets him on the ground, that could get ugly quick.
Long night.
Yeah. I think Shavkat Rakhmonov, in my opinion, will be a champion in that division. So
I guess that throws out any hopes of a third title fight on that last pay-per-view of the year.
well,
We were slightly mentioning it earlier of the possible women's bantamweight title fight.
you can still put the women's
Yeah,
bantamweight
that's true.
title fight on there.
Open up
yeah,
the
you could put it first.
open up the prelims.
It's the featured prelim. We just had a title fight on. We just had a title fight on free TV. You can put the women's bantamweight title.
No, I like this fight.
Featured prelim.
If it can stay on the feet, I'm really worried for Wonder Boy. I think he would have been better off taking an Ian Gary type fight.
I was really on board for that fight too, though.
Yeah,
I wish that would have got booked.
I'm baffled he accepted that fight. It's crazy the things they're doing for Shavkat because they know Shavkat's great, and they're like, well, right now the bantam or the welterweight title picture is so backed up, and they were like, first they were like, yeah, we'll let you welcome Kelvin Gastelum back to the division. Thank God Kelvin Gastelum pulled out of that fight. With all due respect to Kelvin Gastelum, Shavkat was gonna slaughter him. Like what he did to Jeff Neal, who I respect a lot. What Shavkat did to him that was a great fight. But yeah,
I feel like the UFC strong arms Wonder Boy sometimes. He probably needs to get paid because they didn't give him he didn't get to make any money for that last fight because the dude pulled out because he missed weight and Wonder Boy made weight and everything and got screwed over because of that. I feel like they don't treat the nicest mother effer that nice.
No, he's fought Gilbert Burns, Paul Muhammad. He's fought everybody. Yeah, that's wild to me. And shout out to you, Jerry, for keeping an eye on that because that's a good thing to know. Right. Closing the show out with UFC Vegas 79, which we've got tomorrow. Main event will be Rafael Fiziev versus Mateusz Gamrot. This is a fight that I think is very important in the lightweight division. Just when you look at the current landscape of that division, these are the two guys outside of your veterans, outside of your Gaethje, Poirier, Charles, Dariush. These are the next two guys, and the winner of this fight will probably get thrown into that mix somehow or another. Fiziev's already fought Gaethje, Gamrot's already fought Dariush, but I think the winner of this gets tossed into that, whether say Charles loses, maybe they get a fight against Charles. However you want to book this, I think the winner of this is going to be in a very, very good spot. So this fight is very important just for this division as a whole. So what are your guys' thoughts on the main event tomorrow, and who do you see getting the job done? Don't remember whose turn it is, so we'll go with Jerry first.
Right. I like this fight. I think it's going to be fun to watch. That if it's anything, I know it'll be tough to be anything like the Fiziev and Gaethje fight. That was such a back and forth stand up battle, but I could see it being something like that. I like Fiziev in this fight. I think he'll get it done. I think it'll probably be a decision if I'm going to bet on it. I know he has the power to get the knockout. And I mean, don't get me wrong, Gamrot has the power and the skill to get a finish as well. But I just see this one kind of being a battle back and forth, and ultimately a decision at the end of it for Fiziev.
I think I'm rooting for Fiziev a little bit. I don't know why I don't like him. I'm trying to think. Besides that, I thought he lost the Armon Sarukian fight.
He
Maybe
definitely lost the Armin fight. He
that's the
he
only reason.
he won 48-47 and won a round that he got dropped by a spinning back fist. He lost that
Yeah.
fight.
So I think if that's the only reason that I'm biased towards him, because I mean he looked good in the Dariush fight and then the Turner fight. Right? Was that the last one?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Took Turner
Yeah.
on short notice too. So
Okay. So I mean he's I don't know. I think this is just to a T, just a lightweight fight that just shows why lightweight's so much better than other divisions. Is because you could do a 5-6 matchup or 6-7 matchup like this, and it's just going to be high class MMA, and it should be a lot of fun. And yeah, not only high class MMA, but it should get a bit violent too, and be super entertaining in that way. So while I don't know if I have a specific pick for right now, I just lean Fiziev.
yeah, um, I'll say like I'm also rooting for Fiziev, but not as like I like him way more. When I look at like who wins, who do I want to win this fight? I often think what happens next if they win, and the idea of seeing Dustin Poirier versus Fiziev is like that's one of the best fights the UFC can make. That's like a in terms of pure entertainment. That's like pure violence. And that fight, in order for that to happen, Gamrot needs to win this fight. So, or excuse me, Fiziev needs to win this fight.
Mhm.
So that's what I'm rooting for, solely because I want him to fight Poirier and see an all-time great fight. With that being said, I also picked him here. I just think Gamrot gets hit a lot on the feet. Like he got dropped by Turner pretty badly, got dropped by Sarukian, and he got dropped by Dariush as well. So I think Fiziev is gonna be very, very patient, and when Gamrot comes in, he's gonna put a shot or two on him that drops him. And Gamrot will probably wrestle at a very, very high pace. In all honesty, I think the winner of the third round wins this fight. I think first two rounds, Fiziev does well defending takedowns, lands big shots, and wins. Rounds 4 and 5, Gamrot's pace will start to take over a little bit. He'll start landing the takedowns a little bit more. Just kind of comes down to that third round and who wins that round before the tide kind of turns from Fiziev to Gamrot. So that's kind of the way that I look at it. And I picked Fiziev by decision just because I do think he'll land the big shots that hurt Gamrot and win the first three rounds. And his power also carries round 4 and 5, so he does have the potential to win those rounds with the drop as well. So my thought was Fiziev.
Just something else to note: Gamrot's never been finished in his MMA career, so he's clearly finds ways to keep going at the end of rounds, kind of like you were saying, James. So this is gonna be a fun one.
Fiziev is great at getting knocked down into a takedown attempt. He's like that. Like sounds as a joke. It is kind of a joke, also kind of a skill, because if you're getting knocked down, like he was getting hit by Jalen Turner, and whoop, I'm on a single leg now. So kind of defeats the ability to land that takedown. So it is helpful as well. All right. Last fight that we'll talk about, the UFC Vegas co-main event. Dan Ige versus Bryce Mitchell. This is another interesting fight. High stakes in that featherweight division. Where do you guys lean in this one? Anthony, we'll go to you this time.
I was just trying to see real quick who was. I thought Dan Ige looked pretty good in his last fight, didn't he?
Yeah, he beat Nate Landwehr and knocked him down twice in that one.
To be fair, that's not the hardest fight to look good in. Um, so, and then Mitchell, super impressive coming up. I think his last fight was Topuria, who I've, thought, I mean, as most people as well, I've thought is just, disgusting and probably arguably one of the best fighters in that division, except for, Volkanovski. So I would say that Bryce Mitchell fight, 'cause even to go decision with him was probably more impressive than knocking down and beating Nate Landwehr. But I see that fight going. I think Bryce Mitchell just gets him probably with the grappling and jiu-jitsu. I don't know if Danny Gage striking. If I'd take Danny Gage striking, over Mitchell's wrestling, if that makes sense. Also, and I would like to see too, maybe for Mitchell in the first round. I'd have to watch that Topuria fight again if his hands have gotten any better or where they're at right now. I know he's got a little bit, but he can't keep. I would say, I mean, he can only rely on that, wrestling and grappling so much until you run into someone like Topuria, where it doesn't matter. They're almost as good, if not better. So eventually, you got to get the hands going, and I think this is a fight that he could probably do that without the. I think this is a fight where he can work, test the hands out, because in his back pocket against Ige, he can always take it to the ground.
Absolutely. Like going off that, his wrestling and grappling is so much better. We see it time and time again in the UFC. Guys that can grapple and wrestle tend to get a slight advantage over the stand-up strikers if they can get to them. Sugar Sean O'Malley proves otherwise. But I also think this is a bounce back one for Bryce Mitchell. He even said this week that he was annoyed that he went into that fight with Topuria not at full health. This time, I assume he's at full health, full camp. He's going to want to keep making a run up to the top of that division, and I think this is a good step for him to make, and I think he'll continue just dominating.
Yeah, I'm going with the underdog in this one actually. Ige plus 170 is my pick, and I just feel like, and it's more of a respect out of respect for Dan Ige than a disrespect for Bryce Mitchell. I think I rewatched Ige's fight against Evelev and Korean Zombie. Evelev is a great grappler, and I think Evelev would probably outgrapple Bryce Mitchell. And those two guys were also able to strike as well. So those guys had more balanced skills than Bryce Mitchell. So it helped them get it, or excuse me, yeah, they have more balanced skills than Bryce Mitchell. So that's what helped them get that to the ground. I just think in this match, I think Danny is really going to be able to put the hands on him bad. I maybe I'm just overreacting to the Ila Topuria fight because Bryce Mitchell's striking looked really bad in that fight. His kicks were not great, and he does have power in his hands. He dropped Barbosa, but the outside of the power, like, he doesn't have great striking defense. He doesn't really put combinations together. Like, if he's not able to consistently land this takedown, he's going to be in a lot of danger with Dan Ige. And as long as Dan Ige can survive and get back up when he's taken down, he's going to be able to put more damage on Mitchell as the fight goes deeper. So in my mind, it is a very close fight, and I think Bryce Mitchell's grappling is great, but I also really like Danny Gay's boxing, so I'm going to give him the credit for that and pick him in this one. So,
Well, I'd say I think Ige's definitely a tough guy. That's why I think if there is a time, like eventually you got to prove it. You're already ranked and stuff, so that's what I'm saying with the Mitchell. I think this is a great fight to show you got the hands a little bit, or your striking's improved in one way. And if it hasn't, then I can definitely see what you're saying. It play out like that.
Yeah, if Bryce Mitchell comes out and does well on the feet, I will be very surprised, and I will give him a lot of respect and a lot of props for that. So he does have that opportunity here. Forgot to do this for UFC Noche, but let's close it out with our one last thought on the card, or final thought on the card, whether it be the first fight of the night, whether it be the main event. I think this is a good way to quickly get in a point or two about the rest of the card. So what's just one last thought on the card, Jerry? We'll throw it to you first.
Fight that opens up the main card. I don't know why he's just an entertaining fighter, but Charles Jourdain, just a fun guy. Throws a crazy amount of strikes for someone in that featherweight division. It's going to be a fun fight. Him and Ricardo Ramos. That's what I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. That was going to be one of my picks. If not, it's amazing. It's well, Brian Battle, a little tough guy. So that he's always fun. He actually seems pretty good too after the tough thing. He seems better now than he was on tough. I guess that's what improvement is, so that makes sense. But and then my last one was going to say, it's insane that Michelle Watterson is still mid cards, just throwing kicks. She is 37. Good for her. We love that. But I just get to watch her grunt when she kicks for 15 minutes.
Yeah, I was thinking a lot of the same things. Mine was going to be Jourdain and Ramos. That's probably my pickup for fight of the night. I think that's going to be a really, really good fight. Brian Battle as well. Keeping an eye on Brian Battle. Always interested to see if he can make that welterweight weight, because he won Ultimate Fighter at 185. Now he's fighting at 170. A lot of power at 170. AJ Fletcher, interesting guy as well. Trains with Poirier. So those are two fights that aren't at the top of the bill that I'm going to be keeping an eye on for this card. So, all right. Thank you to everyone who tuned in and stuck with us. We had a lot to break down today. UFC Noche, UFC Vegas 79. Not only breaking news from the last couple of days with 3 fight announcements and Paulo Felder's return, but a fight news that happened during the show as well. So thank you to everyone who tuned in. Make sure to subscribe to vendettasportsmedia.com. Make sure to read the website, or excuse me, subscribe to Vendetta Sports Media on YouTube. Read the website, vendettasportsmedia.com. Follow us on Newsbreak. If you're interested on any other fights on the UFC Vegas 79 main card, the preview will be out today, and best bets are already out, so you can read those as well at the website. But most importantly, thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.